Hey everybody, this is Dr. Jacobs. This week we're going to be learning about generalization in chapter 14. All right, let's get started. So we have some unit learning objectives for this unit. First, I want you to be able to define external validity. Second, I want you to be able to discuss how our ability to generalize research finding to broader populations is affected by sex and gender, race and ethnicity, and culture. I want you to be able to describe threats to external validity related to using college students and volunteers as participants, the location where a student takes place, and the use of online samples. I also want you to be able to describe the issues surrounding external validity when researchers study non-human animals. I'd like you to be able to describe how laboratory settings, the use of a pretest, and the characteristics of the research team may impact external validity. I want you to be able to define and discuss the importance of replications, distinguish between exact replications and conceptual replications. I want you to be able to describe what a literature review and meta-analysis are, compare and contrast their role in providing evidence for external validity, and we've kind of done some of that already. All right, so generalizing across people, sex, and gender. So our collective understanding of sex and gender has evolved rapidly as the language around these topics have kind of changed. So typically when researchers say sex, they mean biological sex or the biological classification, which is typically assigned at birth based on external appearance of specific genitalia and denoted most often with terms male and female. So when we talk about sex differences, we're talking about physiological differences. There is a third biological sex, which is intersex, which is a spectrum in between male and female. But a lot of times, a lot of countries don't have that classification for different reasons. And so generally, we only see people classified as male or female. Gender then is a social cultural classification shaped by cultural and historical forces and often denoted with the terms man and woman. Typically, the term gender identity refers to a person's personal and psychological experience of gender. Generalizing across people, race, and ethnicity. Race is the social categorization of humans based on skin color and other physical attributes. No science of human behavior can be complete without considering this critical identity. Ethnicity is how a person belongs or is thought to belong to a population or subpopulation made up of people who share a common cultural background or descent. And research do not overlook the impact that race and ethnicity may have on variables of interest. Additionally, collect data from diverse samples and report your results accordingly. Generalizing across people culture. Culture is the set of behaviors, customs, values, beliefs, knowledge, language, and expressions of a social group. Much research has been focused on Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, which they call weird cultures. Something that's really interesting about this is the person who developed the term weird with the research actually used to be in Missouri at the University of Missouri in Columbia. So if psychologists want to understand human behavior, they must understand human behavior across and among cultures. However, a lot of our research is typically just done with college student populations within Western societies like America. And typically, they don't reflect most of the population of the entire world. Much of the research on culture centers on identifying similarities and differences in personality and other psychological characteristics, and how individuals from different cultures respond to the same environments. So there are some threats to external validity. First, we got to define it. So external validity is the extent to which findings may be generalized to other populations and settings. Note that individuals who participate in psychological research are usually selected because they're available, and the most available population is typically college students. Whenever we use a population or whenever we use a sampling method that revolves around it being because they're available, we consider that a convenience sample. So college students is a highly restricted population, often young with social and political attitudes in flux. A lot of times people in college are trying to figure out who they are. They may have come up with a particular upbringing and then they kind of explore different options to figure out what fits them. Typically, college students have high cognitive skills, which may not be reflected in the general population. And so more similar to each other than adults are similar to other adults in the general population. Also, volunteers tend to differ in different ways than non-volunteers do. They tend to be more highly educated, of a higher socioeconomic status or SES, often more in need of approval, according to our book, more social, and the location where participants are recruited can also impact a study's external validity. Online samples can be more diverse than typical college student samples, but they're still not representative. So there are still issues with generalizing the results from those samples to bigger populations. One of the things is having access to computers and the internet. So their research is also done with non-human animals. A lot of times when they do this type of research, they expect it to be able to be generalized back to humans, but this is not always the case. Basic research with non-human animals is important because the research problems that are addressed require procedures that could not be done with human samples. There's also their own IRB type organization with federally funded universities or state funded universities. At the University of Central Missouri, it's called IACUC. So, generalizing across situations, laboratory settings can kind of limit the ability to generalize the results to real life settings. However, if we are conducting research in real life settings, sometimes it's harder to control different variables to be able to isolate what's actually going on. Also, the use of a pretest can create external validity problems. And then in most laboratory research, only one experimenter is used, and that could potentially influence characteristics of the people who are participating in the experiment or influencing characteristics of the experimenter, such as personality, gender identity, and experience. So replication research is a way of overcoming any problems of generalization that occur in a single study. There's two main types of replication. There's exact replication, where researchers try to precisely replicate the procedures of a study. So that's an exact replication. There's also a conceptual replication. This is when researchers use a different procedure to replicate some sort of research finding. So you can also assess external validity via literature reviews and meta-analysis. So in a literature review, a reviewer reads a certain amount of studies that address a very particular topic, and then they write a paper summarizing and evaluating the research on it. Literature review provides information about, summarizes what's been found before, informs the reader which findings are strongly supported and which ones are weakly supported, points out inconsistent findings in areas in which research is lacking, and discusses future directions for research. So now meta-analyses, though, this is when researchers combine the actual results of a whole bunch of different studies, and then they analyze them using a very specific set of statistical procedures. So one of the most important reasons a meta-analysis can lead to a clear conclusion is that meta-analytic studies focus on effect size. So in stats classes, you should have learned to calculate different effect sizes like Cohen's d. If you remember from stats, effect size tells how meaningful our statistically significant differences or statistically significant results have. And so meta-analyses allow to compare these effect size in different studies so that we can test different types of hypotheses. So for example, Venturo Connerly et al. In 2022 analyzed the effectiveness of psychotherapy delivered remotely for children and adolescents. And so when we have meta-analyses, there's a problem where they call it publication bias, where a lot of scholarly journals will only publish statistically significant results. This is problematic for meta-analyses because there are not insignificant results reported doesn't mean they don't exist. And so that can kind of skew the results of meta-analyses, which is another reason why we as scientists need to find a different way to be able to publish journal articles so that we can really get a better idea of what's going on in the world. So here's an example of what some meta-analysis findings might look like for the example that was on the previous page. Typically, we'll look at different things. So like in this situation, they're looking at effectiveness of remotely delivered therapy for different conditions. So target problems include ADHD, anxiety, conduct disorder, and depression. And you can look at the different effect sizes to see what the findings were. So really, research should be used to improve lives. Psychology and other behavioral sciences have become more diverse in perspectives and practices, which is really important. The behavioral sciences have started to move toward an inclusive and diverse science of humanity rather than only relying on weird populations. So Zimbardo, 2004, described psychology's continuing commitment to giving psychology away. That was actually an address at a psychological convention that was really, really beautiful. And I really love that the book included this because in a lot of the grants and things that I apply, I use this very particular quote because I am a firm believer that we should be giving psychology away. And psychological research impacts areas such as health, education, and work environments. And the American Psychological Association itself has made significant contributions, such as the multicultural guidelines that people can use in research. So that's all we have for this week. You have made it through our entire book. I hope you have enjoyed the lecture so far. And we are almost to the end of the semester.